What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of these, all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to, provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Professor Hanke, Professor Collum. I think that's the first time I've ever called you Professor, Dave. So forgive me for changing it up.
The last time.
Thank you both for doing this, and the conversation I've been looking forward to, so thank you to you both.
You're welcome.
Great to be with you.
This is our, 500th podcast? So,
and especially great to be with my old pal, Dave.
When was the last time you two have spoken?
About a year ago. We talked about bricks.
Yeah. In person, I can't remember. It's about 20 years.
Probably 15, but yeah, it was a long time 15. Back.
It's getting back into the twilight zone.
So we have a couple of questions. I'll ask the first easy one. When we sat down in front of your building at Hopkins, by the way, do you like your new provost?
This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike.
So far, so good. You gave the green light on the guy, and
right.
So far, so good. He stays pretty much under the radar.
Interesting. I guess that's the goal of university administrators now. So, staying off radar is a good move.
Yeah, he seems to be fine.
Okay. When we sat down and we chatted, one of the things you did that is you actually sent me an Excel spreadsheet of your investments. And to say they were unconventional would be a grotesque understatement. I've never seen an odd mix of currency swaps and things like that. But in any event, I appreciated it, sort of. Gold was sitting at about 1,900, and you had just sold. And it was absolutely, you called the top to a T. And the question I have now is, did you get back in and when?
Yeah, I got back in. Now I'm trying to, it's been quite a while ago. More or less at the start of the current secular bull market. And I remain in, and I think the secular bull will peak out at 6,000 an ounce.
Okay. Will that be in some equity crisis phase, do you think?
No, my calculation doesn't have anything to do with exogenous factors at all.
Okay.
It's just a simple calculation, Dave, looking at what happened to gold in 1979, 1980, and where the price was relative to real income per capita in the United States. So if you figure the same ratio, you get about 6,000, a little over 6,000, but let's just call it 6.
Okay.
I like even numbers.
Well, the guys who call things to 4 decimal points always amaze me. How about if you found the platinum story? Because I think platinum story is not just a price story. I think it's a fundamental story. I think the fundamentals of platinum are extraordinary. As an industrial metal, there's so little platinum, there will be so much demand that the world does not have enough.
The answer to that is no. I haven't followed it.
You should check in.
By the way,
I'll send you something.
Recently, speaking of the precious metals, I don't like to trade silver, but I did get into silver at 48.03.
That's pretty good.
And that was one of my old pals from Iowa. I was talking to him, a guy I grew up with, and he was asking me about silver, and I said, "Well, I don't trade it. I don't like to trade it." And he said, "Well, I've got some." And I said, "What, futures, or what are you doing?" And he says, "Oh no," he says, "I got a bunch of ingots and et cetera, et cetera." The guy's got a hoard of silver, and anyway, he got me thinking, and I decided I'd jump in.
The silver story is much vaguer to me because first of all, there's so many people out there who think they understand. Okay, the question that Mike and I want to ask, and I won't make Mike ask it.
Can you elaborate on the platinum thing a little bit?
Platinum, the above ground supply at current price is around $5 billion. So if one hedge fund decides to get funky, that price could go fast, right? If someone takes a big position, that thing's going to take off. At the current consumption rates, and this is the best information I can get, and I always worry that I'm being had, but at current consumption rates, with deficit production, which is in South Africa mostly, which we know could be a failed state on a bad day, it's gone in about 3 years. It's that bad.
Okay.
I'll send you what I wrote up and check it and correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't. It appears as though the world supply of platinum that currently exists is just a tiny amount, and the miners, South Africa's 70%, Russia's another 15% of the production. We haven't exactly made friends with Russia, although I think we could. So.
Okay, do send me that. By the way, is this going to be in your yearly review?
Yeah, it's going to be weird this year, by the way, because I actually I kind of hit a fork in the road. I reached a point where I didn't believe anything I was reading anymore. There was so much crap out there, and my sources seemed to become undependable. And I almost said, "Look, you're sort of tipping at windmills here now." And it used to be when I wrote, and it came, I had to read all my former year in reviews, which was estimated 3,000 pages. And I realized that from 2015 to the present, besides the fact that the equity markets did the impossible, from 2015 to the present, the whole tenor of everything had changed in some subtle but very profound way, where in 15 you could get a fact, you could start building a case, and it would make sense. And now you get a fact, and then the next day you read someone says, no, that's not a fact, and you can't make sense of anything. So I quit writing several times. Then I got into it, that after my Tucker interview, I got into it with a bunch of clowns who were mean-spirited, and that took me a little off my A game. And to write, 300 pages in the fall requires you be on your A game. And I couldn't maintain my A game. So it's shorter, big chunk on finance. I wrote up a case. It's about 40 pages of where we came from and why we're really screwed. And I just laid it all on the table, best I could tell. And it's long term. I don't trade. It's not. I don't know when. I just see thermonuclear warheads ready to be launched from a host of directions. Annie Jacobson like moment in the future. So I made the case. Could be wrong. I've been a stop clock for a long time. Had a great year. My risk assets are up 65% this year, so I can't complain. But I'm still grumpy. And in any case, yeah, I'll send you some stuff. The question, Mike and I, we do podcasts with other guys who talk about, and if they're listening to this, we're not trying to pick a fight with you guys, but they talk about the importance of the City of London. And they're always talking about the City of London. And I got to confess that I've never understood the city of London really what they're not talking about the UK. They're talking about the city of London, which obviously means the financial empire centered in the city of London, as being this profoundly influential place or thing or entity or whatever. Do you know what they're talking about?
Well, I think the Brits are very good with propaganda. I think this is the key to understanding whether it's King Charles or the government or how about the National Health Service? The National Health Service is next to the king, the most important thing in Great Britain, and it's one of the most disastrous health services you can imagine.
But well, Great Britain looks like it's falling apart completely.
That's my take too. By the way, just one footnote back to your reading of the press and facts. Remember Hanke's 95% rule. 95% of what you read in the press is either wrong or irrelevant.
There's another related version of that. What's it called? It's not Stein's Law. It's one of the other ones that says 90% of everything you read is crap. Someone else gets credit for it too. So, but I totally agree. But
at any rate, the city of London never has attracted much of my attention. Quite. So I am not knowledgeable about the topic.
Well, that in itself is an answer to the question, because if they were ruling the world, you would know about it.
Oh, New York rules the world.
Right. I would think so. I would think so.
And by the way, so does the U.S. dollar. So we can, all the de-dollarization talk and everything, a lot of that is hype and hot wind too. But the world's capital market is in New York.
Okay. Mike, tell me when to shut up.
No.
Just keep going.
I want to. You feel free to keep going, but I want to ask Professor Hanke. From the standpoint of New York.
Yeah, Mike, we can use the informal form.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. I want to be respectful. Dave, I've hung out with socially.
I do appreciate that. But,
yeah. I would appreciate some from somebody somewhere. Yeah.
I remember once, Dave, I was walking on the campus with Madame Hanke, who, as you know, is a Parisian.
And you promised me a triple Zoom call with Madame Hanke to talk about some stuff.
We'll do that. Let's do it right after the first of the year. At any rate, we were walking across the campus one day at Johns Hopkins, and some graduate student passed us by and referred to me as Steve. And I thought she was going to collapse.
I get uncomfortable with the formal. I actually get uncomfortable. I think I saw a great meme where it showed some sociology adjunct professor and under it says, "My name is Dr. So-and-so." And then it showed an astrophysicist and says, "Call me Bob." If you know what you're doing, you do not need the formal recognition.
Okay. Steve, if I can ask, go ahead.
With PhD behind their name, I'm very suspicious.
My greatest achievement, by the way, and I got to brag here, my greatest achievement, I got my PhD in 2.5 years.
Well, the only thing I can brag about,
you have plenty to brag about.
I was promoted from the receipt of a PhD to a full professor at Johns Hopkins faster than anyone in the history of Johns.
How long was it? How long was that?
4.
Oh, that's pretty good. Outside offer, no doubt. Big salary raise.
Yeah, well, Berkeley was in the shadows.
Yeah, I know that drill. That a lot of people don't realize is that actual, I don't know, it's like in every department, but faculty salaries are a great demonstration of the free market. Because you get rated, you get a raise. The free market dictates whether you are of worth. And so if some other school comes knocking that's a worthy adversary, your dean starts writing checks.
Right. Or tells
Tells you to take a hike.
or tells you to take the exit door.
Yeah, don't let the door hit you in the ass, right?
We better not get into that.
Well, I'll get my guys to hire you if that happens.
Steve, I want to ask though about New York and what you said with New York running the world. Who within New York, or can you? I need like an org chart. Like I'm 5 years old. Dave and I were talking about this before you jumped on, of who's running the world. So if it's in New York, what can you explain?
Who's really calling the shots? Who's really calling the shots?
I think Mr. Market calls the shots.
Well, one hopes. One hopes. Do you know a guy named Ruchir Sharma?
Yeah, I always read him. He has interesting things in his column.
You know what's really good? So he wrote a book that I just finished, and he does a very nice job of talking about. The phrase I came up with was bad interventions from good intentions, and it's a discussion of all the government interventions and stuff that screw things up. But it's not a screed, right? It's not one of those ones where you say, just let us do our thing and let us make our money and stay out of our way. It's a great analysis of the consequences of things that seem like good ideas and how the market finds a way to get around them, but it just kind of messes things up. Okay. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk about dollar reserve currency. Answer Mike's question. I'm sorry. This is not my podcast.
No, Dave, you feel free. But yeah, so you say the markets are what rule the world, Steve.
Yeah, and the market, I can't remember the total market cap that resides in New York, but it's pushing like 80. It's almost, I think, 80% of all the world's market cap. All the world's market is in New York.
Don't you worry about that though? I think that's a bubble top indicator.
It's not kept me up at night, Dave.
Well, you're probably getting rich, but it worries me because if you look at valuations that get it to that percent, they're pretty extraordinary.
Well, I did an article with one of my students, a former student who's now at J.P. Morgan, Caleb Hoffman. It was published this year, actually, in the Journal of World Economics, and we started looking at the premise, and the premise was that all you had to do is delist in Europe and move to New York, and there's an arbitrage premium that you would receive by moving to New York because of increased liquidity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It turns out that premise is invalid. The international markets are pretty, at least we looked at the European markets, and there was no premium to be had by delisting in Europe and moving to New York, which isn't what we thought, by the way. We thought that New York being dominant would render a premium to those who delisted elsewhere and moved to New York. It didn't pan out.
Well, my chemistry career taught me that there's a lot of things out there that everyone agrees on and make sense that aren't true. And that you have to actually collect the data and do the experiment. And that you can't just do consensus thinking. So,
well, it was the kind of heavy lift, that I was used to when I was a little bit younger than I am right now. But when you do those things, I don't know about you, Dave, but I always say, God, something's wrong. I must have done.
You smell it. You smell it.
We redid the data 3 times, actually. I kept saying, no, this can't be right. And it was right.
Right. I think feels like economics are I think Well, it's not as hard a science as chemistry, because chemistry, you can sort of localize the system to an intelligible unit, where economics, just to understand one thing in economics, it's so connected to the rest of the world that you can't. It's like a butterfly flaps its wings in Thailand, and all of a sudden your model gets blown up.
Yeah, economics is not like chemistry or physics or engineering.
Right. You got a degree in engineering, right? I remember that correctly?
No, I actually received my PhD in economics, but I was working a lot with the civil engineering department, and my second reader on my dissertation was actually a professor of civil engineering, and my dissertation was actually published in the civil engineering department, not in the economics department. But it related to systems engineering, what we used to call systems engineering.
I went to a physics talk one day, and the guy had this great mechanism by which he could throw thousands of variables, and AI could probably now do this, but it would figure out which ones matter and which ones don't. And I asked him if anyone from Wall Street has approached him, and he said, no, not at all. And I go, I think there'd be money to be had in your model. What my understanding is that more data, more variables, more data doesn't necessarily get you closer to the truth. And that if you find the top 5 variables, the rest can be ignored, right?
Oh yeah, this is a first order, second order kind of thing.
That's right.
And most economists can't understand what the first order conditions are. So they're just off base. And everything I've done, we're talking about markets. One of the big things, I'm very plain vanilla guy. Very, very simple models. If you get into economics and get into a long chain of reasoning to reach a conclusion, you got a big problem.
Right. No, you're doomed. You've got layers and layers of 90% probabilities. Pretty soon you have no chance.
Yeah, exactly. So the biggest call actually I ever made was a plain vanilla call. In late 1985, I was at the time I was chief economist at Friedberg Mercantile Group, where I'm still the chairman emeritus at Friedberg's in Toronto. And I had a plain vanilla model of the oil market, and I was convinced that oil would drop to below $10 a barrel and OPEC would collapse, which, by the way, it did. And that was a very plain vanilla.
What year would that have been?
1985, 86. It was a collapse in 86, and oil did go below $10 a barrel.
In fact, it was low till the 21st century, right? Yeah. I mean, it stayed super low.
Right. So we were young then, and the idea of risk control wasn't quite in our on our radar screen. And ex post facto, we found out, we're speaking now of the city of London, we had 70% of all the short interest in oil in London.
I shorted twice the equity markets, and I will never do that again, because it's for pros and morons, which I think has a big Venn diagram overlap. But I made money both times, and I realized I just don't do that. It's just not for guys like me.
Yeah, well, shorting equities is not for guys like me either. But we're talking about oil, not equities.
I know. At one point, I said I was going to short bonds.
The futures market, going long or short is just you don't even think you're just taking a position. Whether it's long or whether it's short is kind of irrelevant when you're used to the futures.
At one point, I was going to short bonds when I thought the rates couldn't go lower. How naive. I told Mark Gilbert at Bloomberg I was going to do it, and he said, don't do it. I told Gerard Minnick I was thinking about it, and he said, don't do it. So I didn't do it. and they save me a lot of money. Of course, I don't take big positions when I do stuff like that. So, but a short can become a big position if you do it wrong. So, any event, talk about the dollar reserve currency, because we talked about the BRICS last time we talked, and I am not convinced the dollar reserve currency is stable.
So 2 points. One is, well, the first thing, just to preface, it's a little like New York being the capital market of the world. I mean,
right.
Every place else is kind of a footnote. Let's face it. And
right.
That's the same with the dollar. The dollar is the international reserve. Shall we say, not reserve currency? The international currency is the dollar. Most things are priced in dollars. Dollars are de facto the currency of the realm, and many developing countries, there's more dollar value under the mattress and dollar notes than local currencies. About 70% of all the U.S. dollar bills that exist in the world are actually not in the United States or overseas, under a mattress. You go to any country in the world and you ask a taxi if, will you take dollars? The guy will say, of course, and you do the transaction in dollars. So let's go back 2,500 years and do this in an academic way, since we have two professors here. Mike's already glazing over with that preface.
Oh, don't underestimate Mike.
So 2,500 years. No, I wasn't underestimating.
Okay, go for it.
I was saying he looked like there might be a boredom factor that was creeping into the picture once I said 2,500 years. We're not going to go through all of the history of the dollar over that time, because the dollar didn't even exist then. But there was always one international currency. There always is one international currency. And how many have we had? 2,500 years, we've had 14. The U.S. dollar is king now. So it's hard to knock the king off the throne. Once an international currency is established, it has network effects, scaling effects, and so forth that keep it on the throne. So that's setting the table. We've set the table. Now, what about the dollar today? We have, since 9/11, we've had one series of sanctions after another, financial sanctions, and that makes the U.S. dollar less attractive. People want to get an alternative to something that might be sanctioned. So that's a reality. And now
2022 is particularly alarming to the world, right? 2022 is when global central banks started buying a lot more gold.
Absolutely, because of course 2022 we had the so-called Russian invasion in Ukraine, and the sanctions went on steroids. So that has made the dollar more vulnerable. It's made a lot of talk and a lot of headlines about de-dollarization, but the reality is that the actual dollar transactions from 2022 to 2024 have actually gone up a little bit. The proportion of transactions taking place in dollars has actually gone up 2 percentage points. The transactions in euros has gone down by 2 percentage points. The transactions in yen have gone up by, I think, about 4 or 5 percentage points. Now, the yen is at 7%. It's still a footnote, but not the yen. I misspoke. The Chinese yuan. The Chinese yuan has gone up. So the U.S. dollar has increased its portion. The Chinese by even more so, and the euro has actually gone down.
The euro could go away almost once census. Is that correct?
Well, Europe could go away.
Well, that's sort of the origin of my thought.
I mean, these folks have such Russia phobia that they're determined to get into war with Russia, and all of them are in fiscal terrible shape. I mean, look at Germany, look at France.
So Germany has managed to just self-destruct completely, right down to the foundations, right?
Well, they did because because first you had Merkel, and most people don't realize what a disaster she was,
right,
in terms of economic policy. And remember, with Fukushima, she did away with nukes. so they don't have tsunamis in Germany, but at any rate, they don't have nuclear power. Coal is out. They've been green by big time, and the gas they were receiving at low prices from Russia is petered out and is almost nothing now. So the electric cost and energy cost in Germany have gone through the roof. They're like 3 times higher than in the United States. And Germany has an industrial economy. Manufacturing as a percent of GDP in Germany is 23%. The average in Europe is about 12% manufacturing. So the deindustrialization will occur, taking Germany from that 23%, I think, down to 12, 13, 14, 15%, something like that. So this is the biggest story in Europe, is the destruction of Germany.
Right.
And it's the sanctions. The sanctions against Russia, of course, have backfired on Europe big time, because Europe was fueled with cheap gas from Russia.
And then we're told a Ukrainian in a yacht blew up the pipeline.
Right.
People don't understand why we don't fess up to blowing up the pipeline, and they don't realize that if we did, that would be an act of war. So we have to pretend like we didn't blow up the pipeline. Okay.
Cy Hirsch analyzed this early on.
I know.
And it's very clear the West blew the pipeline.
Yeah.
Why, Steve? Why is Europe continuing to do this then? Why are they continuing to sabotage their own countries?
Well, I think they have an ideology. They're not analyzing facts. Back to what Dave was talking, and benefit cost calculation. The ideology is to unify Europe, to have a unified Europe, and this is one way to do it. You put this is back to Hobbes and Leviathan. You put the fear of God into somebody, and somebody does what? They give up all their liberties to be protected by the state. So that's what's going on now. All this business about Russia getting ready to invade Europe and so forth, and we have to militarize Germany, introduce the draft again in Germany. And by the way, I think this will backfire big time, because the populations in Europe are not too keen on the draft, by the way.
I would think that. Putin said it brilliantly, said, you guys say that Russia is going to attack Europe? Do you think we're nuts?
Yeah, well, for one thing, look at how much trouble they're encountering in Ukraine, just taking over the Donbass.
Is that trouble or is that patience?
Well, I think it's probably a combination.
So you said so-called, which caught my attention, because I have planted a flag in the story that you can blame the entire Ukrainian war on NATO.
Oh, that I completely agree.
Okay.
But so what's Europe want to do now? They want to get they say, okay, fine, you're not going to join NATO, but we want security guarantees. Now, what do those mean? That means a de facto NATO. That means Article 5 will come in the back door, And the Russians are never going to sign this. And of course, Trump gets taken to the cleaners. One day he says we're going to do one thing, and then the Europeans have a confab with Zelensky and turn the table around on Trump. And whatever they come up with, by the way, the Russians will not sign it.
Someone will undermine it. There are people who just don't want. So here's my working model is, I think if Putin and Trump could sign a deal and ignore Europe, they could do it in a day. Putin would say, we want all this. Trump would say, we want bilateral trade agreements. They'd say, done. But Europe can't tolerate that. Is that correct? Is that a reasonably simplistic model?
Yes, that is a correct model. But it's a good plain vanilla model that I think meets all the conditions for first order.
The Hanke theorem.
Well, I was going to call it the Collum. I don't want to have that monkey on my back.
Okay, we'll stay off of Mr. Hanke jokes then. Okay. Trump just announced they were going to get rid of about 4 metrics put out by the federal government. And everyone was having a cow. And I looked at the 4 and I go, what is the problem with this? They were a bunch of metrics. I can't even remember them, but they were the kind of metrics where those of us who are distrusting say those numbers are total bullshit. And those who are trying to write analyses are handcuffed by those numbers. Like, let's take, for example, the CPI, right? So you get handed the CPI by this corrupted process that Boskin screwed up royally. And so now when you inflation correct, you're stuck with a CPI. You can't go off the reservation. And so the fact that Trump wants to get rid of these federally dictated statistics strikes me as a positive, because then the free market guys will say, okay, we got to roll up our sleeves and answer this question. Did you catch that?
Yes, but I think I'm a little bit more tolerant.
By definition, because I'm intolerant.
I'm a little, it's like, when you looked at the Anti-Federalist and you had Jefferson and Monroe and George Washington, and that versus, shall we say, Hamilton. Well, Jefferson was always kind of a Collum, a radical.
Erratic. You could just say erratic.
Well, I would just, Jefferson was the most radical, and Monroe would always tamp it down a little bit, and then Washington, he would tamp it down even a little bit more. So I don't get too excited about these because these indices, because by the way, there are a whole host of indices. It's not the CPI.
Oh, I know.
And whenever you're doing aggregations and looking at indices, I'm just very suspicious of all of them because they're indexes.
Well, so let's talk about inflation indices for a second, because everyone should correct for inflation. The absurdity is when someone shows me a plot and doesn't correct for inflation. How you correct for inflation is a completely different story. Tell me what you think about that. Give me a quick synopsis of how you think about correcting for inflation.
Okay, this is a good question, and then we'll come back to the dollar, because actually I want to talk about that a little bit.
And I want to ask you something about that too, Steve. I want to ask you about de-dollarization.
Here's the correction. This gets into the affordability thing, Dave, and there's something in economics called the money illusion. And the money illusion is that you go into the store and you see the price tag, and by the way, unless you have a deflation going on, no matter what your index, you're always at the all-time high of your index.
Always.
So you go into the store, you look at the price of eggs or milk or whatever it happens, gasoline, and that's what hits you. And you don't correct for the fact that your income, your nominal income has gone up, and maybe it's gone up faster than the nominal price that you're looking
exactly
at.
Right.
So the real price is actually lower, and you're better off than you were. That's not how people think. There is a money illusion, and I think it's with us in spades now, since we had this inflation flare up, starting with the Fed's irrational policies during COVID and the inflation that we got. And I think this will be Trump's Achilles heel, by the way.
Do you think salaries have outraced prices then during the last 5 years? Let's say the median person of salaries outraced prices. Do you think?
I don't have the numbers right in front of me, so I can't.
Just a yes or a no kind of feel.
Yeah, I think at the median, it's probably a pretty close to a break even.
Okay.
The key thing to realize is that the Fed is engaged in non-neutral monetary policy, and the non-neutral monetary policy works like this. The transmission was that in February of 2020, COVID hit, and the Fed hit the accelerator on the money supply. And they did that because the fiscal deficit expanded, and about 90% of it was monetized by the Fed. So we had the money supply going up at the fastest year-over-year rate since
Is M2
M2 since the founding of the Fed, and then we had inflation, which peaked out at 9.1%. Now, what did that do? That was non-neutral. It benefited the very rich.
Yep. Because
with the transmission mechanism, once the money supply goes up, the first thing that goes up is the value of asset prices. So the stock market boomed, real estate boomed, land prices boomed, all commodities boomed, and who has assets? Rich people have assets.
Mm-hmm.
And at the start, this is a shocker now. At the start of 2020, billionaires' wealth as a percent of GDP was 14.1%. Now it's 22.7%. So the biggest creator of income inequality in the United States is the Fed.
So
by the way, this new book that Matt Sekurki and I have written, Making Money Work.
I ordered it yesterday, by the way.
Great. I think you'll enjoy it. And one chapter 11, is on neutrality, and the fact that the monetary policy should be designed to be as neutral as possible, so it doesn't favor particular sectors of the economy or particular groups in the economy. That's the neutrality chapter. And it turns out that monetary policy in the United States is very non-neutral. I just gave you the example.
Not at all, right?
The rich became very rich with the pump up in the money supply and the following increase in asset prices and inflation. So that's one aspect, but also it's very tilted, by the way, to real estate. Real estate is a huge beneficiary of monetary policy in the United States.
Okay, so I just finished writing a section on real estate, so it's on the top of my mind. I think everyone agrees. I add the third leg of this thing. Everyone agrees we kept rates too low for too long. If you want, you can add too artificially, too many times. Now I'm hearing the mossbacks of the market saying we have to drop rates. And I go, again? We all agree that they blew it by doing it over and over and over. And now you want to. Now, here's the problem I have. People want to drop rates to protect the housing market's pricing, to prevent another real estate problem. The problem with that is that what it's doing is you are protecting the wealth of the boomers who benefited by elevating it so that they can sell their houses to Gen Z, who not only just got finished accruing debt from their student loans, but they're going to be handed overpriced houses that when rates finally do go up, they're holding the bag. Why should we drop rates? Is there an argument?
No.
Thank you.
So
I came here for confirmation bias, and you're doing a fine job.
Okay, so let's go through let's drill down just a little bit more than the interest rate. So we know that the Fed funds rate, which is the only rate that's actually controlled by the Fed, will go down for a variety of reasons. The composition of the Open Market Committee is such that will go down. There's a massive pressure by Trump, a real estate guy, to push them down too. So that's one thing in the loosening. But there are three other things going on. The second thing, starting this month, we're in December of 2025, QT, quantitative tightening, was stopped. Now,
Right.
quantitative tightening was doing what? The contribution to the money supply, M2, by the Fed was actually negative. They were actually, they weren't contributing. They were subtracting to the growth in the money supply with QT.
So are you saying that was actually a sort of, monetarily speaking, a deflation?
Well, no. The M2, 80% of M2 is contributed by commercial.
So you weren't saying overall contraction?
I wasn't saying overall.
Okay.
You have the tiny part that the Fed balance sheet was contracting and dragging down, slowing down the growth rate in the money supply. Now, in December, they stopped QT, and at the same time, they announced they were going to buy $40 billion worth of T-bills, the Fed. So they're switched from QT to QE, quantitative easing. So that's another easing thing. So you got the first thing, the lower interest rates on the Fed funds on the low end of the yield curve, because they can't control the high end. It will go down. And then we're switching from QT to QE. And then you've got in April, the big one coming, and that is bank regulations. The supplemental liquidity ratio will be dropped, and that will free up a lot of reserves at the banks and their capacity to loan.
Is this Basel III? Is this Basel III you're talking about?
No,
this is something else.
This is something like that, but remember in 2008 we had Dodd-Frank come in, because remember, banks were bad, and we had to control bankers and banks. So they put this to make banks safe. We had to have a supplemental liquidity ratio requiring banks to even hold more reserves against their assets, against their liabilities, than would have been the case. So that's going to be dropped, but it will give the banks about $2.5 trillion more in capacity to loan. And banks are already loaning. The loan rate growth is about 6.8% right now. And Hanke's golden growth rate for the money supply, consistent with hitting an inflation target of 2%, is 6%. So they've already accelerated beyond the 6%. I think they'll probably end up going up to like 10%. So what's all this mean? This means we're going to have a looser monetary policy, and the inflation genie is not going to be put back in the bottle. And forget, yesterday we had the CPI. You talked about the CPI. The CPI dropped from 3% to 2.7%. But that was a fluke, because the government was shut down for 40 days, and they didn't start collecting data until mid-November, and included in the sample Black Friday, which distorted the hell out of the thing, because you have all these discounts.
So fluke is a synonym with lie, then, is what I would say.
Yeah, right. And I agree with that. This confirmation bias coming in again. Mike, you got the wrong two guys.
Yeah, we could go for hours hammering away at how smart we are.
I think this is to be a monthly series with you two, I think.
So one of the great observations that was sent to me by a guy named Bob Grice, who runs the chart store. He charts everything. And he sends me the annual chart showing the return on the S&P and the return on the S&P over the last 100 years, corrected not using CPI, but using M2. And the capital change from 1925 to 2025 using M2 is down. And if you take the total return, including dividends, it's around 3.7% annualized total. Yeah, so 3.7% annualized. Now, what he doesn't correct for, and a guy named Ed McQuarrie, who I bet you know. Do you know Ed McQuarrie, Irvine? Ed McQuarrie, I asked him one day, who corrects for taxes and fees? I know Vanguard talks about fees. And he said, basically, I don't think you can do it because it's too situationally dependent. Everyone's taxes are different and things like that. But if you add taxes and fees into that 3.73%, I bet you you're getting an M2 corrected 100-year return of in the 2s% annualized. That's why I obsess over inflation.
Well, my only reaction is the number 2 is interesting because that's essentially the potential long run growth rate in the
GDP.
States.
Right, it's the GDP.
Yeah, right.
Right. If you actually, I've done this math. What do you think the book value of the world was like it was at the time of Christ? You got some buildings, you got some real estate, right? Call it $1 billion. If you compound $1 billion to the present, the compounded annualized rate to get to the present is something like 0.1%, which means we produce wealth at exactly the same rate that we consume it, destroy it, and decay it. And I go, well, of course.
Yeah. So this reminds me of Ken Boulding, my old professor Ken Boulding, his bathtub theorem. You know, you got something going in the tub, you got something draining out of the tub, and what
they better match. They better match.
Yeah, what you're saying, Dave, is that the tub isn't filling very fast.
Right. What we compound exponentially is knowledge, right?
Right.
It's knowledge.
Fortunately, because that lifts the lid off the so-called finite resources that we have.
That's right. So we can learn. There's a great quote I use that says, "There's overwhelming evidence that people ignore overwhelming evidence."
I love that
one. Say that again, Dave. Dave, say that again.
There is overwhelming evidence that people ignore overwhelming evidence.
That's a coffee mug right there. That's merchandise.
Yeah, that's like when I told Tucker the blind nut finds the squirrel. I'm dominating the shit out of this thing. I apologize. I've got so many questions. Again, so back to correcting for inflation.
Make sure we carve time out for Venezuela too, Dave.
Yeah,
by the way.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do Venezuela and dollarization. I'm making a note so I forget. Dave, you're so fascinating that I'm just listening.
Okay, thank you for humoring me.
I was going to say the same thing about both of you guys, Steve and Dave.
So I hate the CPI. I like M2. I think Trueflation is really just a spinoff of probably the MIT Billion Price Index. And I think it's flawed because I think it's just trying to monetize the CPI. So it comes up with the same numbers, but people think they're more accurate. And they don't know how to weight a billion prices. They have no idea how to weight a billion prices. You can't take a toothpick and a Maserati and put them together and say what's the inflation rate. Is there another one? I had this thought. Here's Collum's inflation index. You find 100 people who have good numbers on their inputs. A guy runs a plumbing shop. A guy who owns a diner, right? You pick this wide thing and just say, keep track of your input changes over the year. 100 diverse small company owners, and just say, what's happening to the price of running your business? And that gets back to the idea of more data doesn't necessarily give you a better answer. You give me 100 guys who can tell me what's going on with their business. Like a friend of mine, Jimmy Iorio, gives me hard numbers on what his restaurant in Chicago does. It's really useful.
So, well, I agree with that. That's a boots on the ground field work.
Right.
Nothing beats field work. I mean, if you're buying a company and you don't do due diligence, I mean, seriously buying a company, you got to go kick the tires and see what's going on. You don't sit in the ivory tower at Cornell University and diddle around with a pencil or spreadsheet or whatever it is. You got to go out in the field. So,
but so you got 19,000 private equity guys buying companies who are not kicking tires.
Oh, they don't. They're clueless, especially the younger people. The problem is, and I've thought quite a bit about this. You have to have Michael Poloni's tacit knowledge. Not some people call that common sense, street smarts, whatever you want. The sophisticated thing is it's tacit knowledge. You have to know lots of things that you can't learn in books.
Right.
That's right. Tacit knowledge. And by the way, fortunately, where I grew up in rural Iowa, you're basically being taught tacit knowledge by the old timers that take you under their wing. And you got a bunch of jobs starting when you're about 12 or 13. You're working this job, that job, that job, and you just pick up a lot of this tacit knowledge kind of thing, which means what? It means if you go to kick the tires, you can kick them.
One of the theories in human evolution is that old guys start repeating themselves, which we do. And it's the way that we make sure what we learned get passed along. So oh, Dad, you told me that story 5 times already. That's because that's an important story. Yeah, so we evolved as a tribal society to make sure that we didn't miss these.
Yeah, let me tell you, of course, everything has collapsed with the students, I think, since COVID.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, oh. Yeah. So here, let me get, you'll love this, Dave. So I got the premier students at Johns Hopkins University, which it's an okay place. It's like Cornell. You got the cream of the crop, and I skim the cream, and you have to have permission of instructor to get into my courses. So basically, okay, there's been grade inflation. Talking about inflation, by the way, the grades in the Ivy League in 1950s and 60s when we were going to college, the GPA for a graduate of an Ivy League school was between 3.2 and 3.8. Now it exceeds 3.8. So there has been a lot.
That's Harvard's number. That's Harvard's number.
That's Harvard.
By the way, Cornell chemistry hasn't moved its GPA in 35 years. We anchored it.
So, well, good for you. Now, let me give you the story. And the story, this is a tacit knowledge thing. So I got one of my assistants. I have a room across the hall from my office where my lab basically is across the hall. Okay. So I give the guy the keychain. It's got 4 keys on it to go open the lab, to get in there so he could work, doing spreadsheets or whatever he was doing. There was a little pause. He walks down the hall and then he comes back. There were 4 keys on the ring, and he said, "Well, Professor Hanke," he said, "which key opens 240?" And I said, "Jesus Christ, you got 4, just try them,
San Diego, UCSD, are bringing their SATs back. They did a test and wrote a report they tested their freshmen, and 25%, that something like 40% were working at middle school level math. 25% failed to successfully answer the question, 7 plus 2 equals 6 plus X. What is X? I think my first grade grandson could do that question.
Well, you see, this is the problem. Speaking of spreadsheets, the big problem, they'll embed a formula into a spreadsheet, and they brainlessly do the thing. And I tell them, I said, no, get a piece of paper and a pencil and write the damn formula out and check it once in a while, because by the way, they can make huge mistakes, and they have no idea they've made a mistake, and to get a mistake detected and found in a spreadsheet is virtually impossible. You have to go back, and I basically tell them, start over, forget about feeling your way around through and figuring out which cell you made the mistake in.
And this is all at the infancy of AI. We're already feeling this effect, and AI is just getting started. The kids will never write another paper again without help. The kids will never do their homework again without help. I don't know. I have no idea how society is going to negotiate this.
It's going to be a complete disaster. Let me give you another example. So I've got an assistant in the office in the summer, and one thing the assistant does, I like to work in hard copy. So every email that I get, that I correspond with, I get the hard copy. I write out longhand my answer. I give it back to the assistant. The assistant types the thing in. So that's the drill. So the assistant, one thing the assistant has to do is keep track of who I'm corresponding with, what's going on. So the guy this summer, he never could get the following. I would say, who did we correspond with yesterday? Who did we send the email to yesterday? He never could remember. He never could remember from one day to the next, because it's this AI kind of deal going on.
Well, the other thing I noticed, I had a class of 25 last year in a sophomore class, and they were all phenotypically shy kids. And I realized statistically that's impossible, especially at Cornell, right? We're supposed to be taking kids who are rock stars in various ways. They were all shy. And I realized is that this whole iPhone addiction thing has created a generation of kids who are now phenotypically shy.
Well,
they have absolutely no social skills whatsoever.
We're going to get in trouble now.
They have their AirPods. Though young people.
It is a very interesting, and I would say it isn't an obsession with me, but it's something I observe, and then I read data like the thing you gave from San Diego, which I've read. All the data confirm, by the way, what I observe myself. And by the way, I don't, remember when you start trading, you have a notebook, and you write down everything in the notebook, every guy you talk to on the telephone, what the guy told you, you write it down with a pencil in a notebook. I've got hundreds and hundreds of notebooks actually stored in a big, massive closet adjacent to my office. But this gets down to, I don't allow students to take notes with a computer. And
my handwriting, I could not read my own handwriting, so I would break Hanke's law number 2.
I still do that, though. Actually, ironically,
literally, I can't read my own writing.
Yeah, well, that's another. Mike, I'm taking notes.
Well, I am too with my printer, with my keyboard.
Should we? I know Steve's
Let's go to Venezuela. Go to Venezuela.
Yeah, Steve, you're on a hard time, right? You got about 25 minutes left.
let me educate you. If you look at the studies that the psychologists have done, the retention of information and knowledge, handwritten, is much, much greater than using a keyboard.
Hmm.
And there's another, side effect, external effect, as we would call it in economics, associated with all this keyboard stuff, and that is the students can't write. I mean, they can't even write. They can't read script. I can
Cursive.
I can write
Yeah.
pretty neatly in script, Dave. And
Yeah.
and if I hand it back to some of my students, they can't read script now.
I'm sure there's an AI program that would translate it.
Well, yeah, they do. That's what they do. That's what they do. But the problem is, once they do that, it's got so damn many errors in it that then I've got to proofread what I gave them.
Go to Venezuela. We got to get the good stuff out.
Steve, you got a hard.
Old men effect
Steve, you got a hard.
is,
What's your hard stop? How much more time do you have, Steve?
Probably 10 minutes.
Go for it.
So, yeah, this is going to be a record for me. This is a record long podcast. I'm probably going to collapse by the time we get done with 10 minutes. So let's go back to the dollar. The thing Dave asked me about the 2,500 years. It's hard to knock the international king off the throne and so forth. So the narrative is de-dollarization. And so this has been a concern in Washington, D.C. And one ad hoc thing that turned back the clock on de-dollarization was stable coins, the dollar-based stable coin, and the Genius Act. And the Genius Act requires essentially the producer of a stable coin to back the bulk of it with T-bills. Mm-hmm. So that increases the demand for T-bills. Mm-hmm. So that is a pro-dollarization initiative, stable coins. Mm-hmm. Now, let me give you this. You're going to love this, Dave and Mike. The top purchasers of T-bills in 2024 were who? Number one was J.P. Morgan, $53.4 billion. Number two was China, $48.7 billion. Number three, stable coins at $34 billion.
Wow.
And it gets back to what I was talking about with the monetization of the T-bills. 20% of the Treasury issues now to finance the fiscal deficit in the United States are T-bills. They're leaning into T-bills, and they're being sucked up by J.P. Morgan, China, and stable coins. So then the thinking was some bright guy in Washington said, well, look, we really should counter the de-dollarization thing with a pro-dollarization thing. And who's the money doctor who knows about this, who's done it? Well, it happens to be yours truly. So they've had me down there starting in August to design a strategy for a pro-dollarization strategy. So in addition to the stable coins, that's done. They're already on board. That was an ad hoc thing. But if you had an overall strategy, what would it look like? It would look like promoting the use of the dollar and replacing local currencies where you have local junk currencies with the U.S. dollar. Prime candidate, Argentina, because the President Milei has already campaigned on and won an election based on the promise that he was going to get rid of the peso, mothball it, and put it in a museum. Well, he hasn't done it yet. But what if Trump would nudge him a little bit and say, why didn't you do what you promised to do, to use the U.S. dollar? So that's one approach. The other approach is to, and that's, by the way, something I did in Ecuador in 2000. Ecuador got rid of the sucre and replaced the sucre with the US dollar. They dollarized. So that's one approach. The second approach is to have dollar-based currency boards, which I did in Estonia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and Bosnia and Herzegovina in the 1990s. So that my idea would be, okay, they've embraced stable coins. Okay, fine. Put that in addition to that, full dollarization and dollar-based currency boards. Now we get to Venezuela. It turns out the Venezuela opposition, the unity democracy group that is the opposition, I am the chief economic advisor, and dollarization is number one. Step number one. If you get in power, the first thing you're going to do is get rid of the bolivar, which by the way, the world's highest inflation rate right now. I measure the inflation in Venezuela every day. It's 541.1%. The inflation rate now, year over year. So you get rid of the bolivar, which by the way is hyperinflated 2 times under Maduro, once in 2018 and once in 2020. And those were inflation rates over 50% per month to hyperinflate. Mm-hmm. So you get rid of the bolivar, you replace it with a dollar, and while stability might not be everything, everything is nothing without stability. So that's step one.
So Maduro's not long for this earth.
Well, we don't know that, because remember, the reason he's been long for this earth is because of sanctions by the U.S. Sanctions by the U.S. started with Chavez in 1999 when Chavez took over and introduced Chavismo, that form of socialism. And the U.S. imposed sanctions one after the other. And that just creates a rally around the flag effect that keeps mm-hmm. these guys in power. Mm-hmm. Why do you think the Castroites are still in power in Cuba? Because of sanctions.
I was just about to ask you why we don't absorb Cuba into our orbit. It seemed why it seems like decades ago, or at least years ago, that should have happened. It should have been easy. Why not?
Oh, it would have been easy. No sanctions, and the place would have. By the way, the place would have de facto dollarized.
Oh, absolutely, immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately, right. Well, so why didn't we just go to Cuba and say, look, we can make your lives 10 times better. We'll drop all the bullshit. You drop all the bullshit. Let's get together and stop this old Cold War crap. Oh, why didn't that happen?
Because people in Washington are not the sharpest knives in the drawer.
No, the sharpest bulbs in the deck is the phrase.
Okay. I'll go for that.
Triple mixed metaphor.
So coming back to Venezuela then and Maduro, so the sanctions are what's keeping him into power? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. The sanctions now, it turns out sanctions never work. They never work to overthrow a government. Very, very, very rarely. Blockades are another kettle of fish. Blockades have a higher probability of regime change. And by the way, the U.S. has been, with the CIA, involved in hundreds of these regime changes since World War II.
I know. I read a lot about this stuff.
This is their favorite weapon. They don't go into open warfare, but they do go into the sanctions weapon in an attempt to change regimes. And the history of this has been catastrophic.
I'm glad you said that.
Now,
I read 3 or 4 books on this subject a year, and it just makes me crazy.
Let's go back to my old professor, Ken Boulding, who, by the way, was a good Quaker and one of the pioneers in peace research. And Bolding said that we would have peace if two conditions were met. If everyone agreed on the borders and the fixity of borders that exist in the world, and everyone agreed that we would not be meddling in each other's business.
But that's not profitable. That's not profitable.
And if you look, what's happened in Ukraine? What's happened in Ukraine? There wasn't an agreement on borders, number one, and there was a lot of meddling, and the main meddling was the NATO.
Yeah,
the
Victoria
NATO.
Nuland and those guys. Yeah, totally.
Well, Jim Baker told Gorbachev, or actually it was the foreign minister at the time. Now his name is.
But it was Baker, though. Yeah.
It was Baker, the foreign minister. The foreign minister actually was from Georgia. I'm hitting up blank. I can't remember his name.
Okay.
Anyway, he and Baker got on very well, fished together in Wyoming, you name it. And Baker said, "Don't worry, NATO is not going to be encroaching on the borders of what is
the
Russia."
Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact.
The Warsaw Pact. When the Warsaw Pact was dropped, NATO should have been mothballed and put in a museum.
Totally. This is no purpose.
So at any rate.
So Venezuela, we are attempting to pull into our orbit. Is the bottom line.
We're attempting to pull it into our orbit. It's not clear that this is going to happen, by the way, because we've had one failure after another, and I think Trump is the one that's backed into the corner. There's always two sides to the coin. The propaganda coin says that Maduro's backed into a corner, but actually, the rally around the flag effect is taking hold in Venezuela today, and the big mistake that Trump has made is saying that the Venezuela stole our oil, and that's riled the Venezuelans up, and they're rallying around Maduro now.
Quick question, lightning round like question. Trump, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being he's an erratic nutball who's totally unpredictable and of no value, to 10 being he's playing 5D chess and he's fighting powerful forces and he's doing stuff that no one else could do. Where do you put him on the scale?
Dave, I must confess, I left my crystal ball in the closet today.
So you haven't been able to formulate an opinion on that. This is what bothers. This is why writing about what's going on in the world is getting hard. Trump thrives in chaos. That's absolutely clear, right? He plays well on a muddy field.
Well, that's true. The thing we're getting at is what has been created by Trump is what's called regime uncertainty. We have uncertainty all the time, this thing, that thing, and so forth and so on. But we've only had regime uncertainty 2 times in the history of the United States. One, well, in modern times, I'm not, and that one is with the New Deal and FDR, and the New Dealers created regime uncertainty because they were changing everything. Everything was being changed, and so you didn't know what the hell was going on. Mm-hmm. And of course, the business community at the time in 1929, they thought they knew what was going on, and that they weren't going to invest. And they stopped in 1929 because of all this regime uncertainty. There was essentially no investment in the United States from 1929 until almost World War II.
So cute nugget, they were doing QE in the late 20s. Worked really well, didn't it? Another entertaining book is Bubble Under the Sun. I think it's called Bubble Under the Sun. It's about the Florida real estate boom and bust. And it's a very entertaining read. It's not, but it's also great if you've been to Florida enough times. It's a great history of the development of Florida. So you read about Miami, and you say it's this little shack and, 4 houses and you go, that's Miami in 1890. What? So
Yeah.
it's an entertaining story about the development of Miami, but also the book gives credit to the Florida bust as a major factor in the Great Depression.
Well,
not just a trigger.
This gets back to a key point that we can wind up on, and that is, things always revolve around real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, think about the thing I said about Ken Boulding and Borders. That's a real estate. That's a real estate problem. Yeah. Think about the United States and the federal lands. The federal lands, most people don't realize it's the biggest socialist enterprise and one of the biggest ones in the world. The U.S. not only owns 8% of Intel or whatever the damn thing was, 10%. They own a land area that's 6 times larger than the land area of France.
So Trump taking equity in these strategic industries, like AMD and Intel, and this seems awful to me. Is that correct, or is there a subtlety?
That's correct, and it's all been done, by the way, this interventionism, which Biden was doing the same thing, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's not like I'm giving Biden slack, right?
The model is definitely a Biden-Trump model. So, okay. So you can't disassociate. This started with COVID big time. Mm-hmm. And so we have an interventionist state, not a socialist in the old-fashioned Marx Engels kind of framework, but we have an interventionist state. And that has been the big shift since 2020. And it's going to end in clearly a river of tears. And the justification for it is national security. They wrap this thing around the flag all the time. And remember,
always
Samuel Johnson, national security is always a refuge for scoundrels.
Seward, who has a house up the lake from me, he bought Alaska for 2 cents an acre, and when asked why, this is actually either prophetic or a lie, but he said national security. And did he know that we would have a nuclear era coming forward? I don't know, but he bought it. He said he bought it for national security. It was a good buy, right? I mean, that turned out to be a pretty savvy move.
It was a good buy,
right?
So was the Louisiana Purchase was a hell of a good buy, too.
Well, that one, isn't it true that the French knew they were going to lose it, so they said we might as well sell it while we can get something?
Yeah, Napoleon made his move and did his calculations.
Said, okay, let's sell it, get some cash, and get out of this game. Yeah. Well, we can go on forever and ever. You got anything else, Mike?
No. I just what I was going to say is I'd love to do this again with both of you guys because sure. We could just keep going, and God knows, in next year there's going to be a lot to talk about. So, Steve,
Mike, the key question is whether anyone will want to listen.
I like listening. That's all that matters.
I think they will.
I do too. The three of us could put on whether anyone else is going to.
Well, it's a diseased mind that cares about what people you don't know thinks about you. That's worth remembering. You shouldn't care what people don't know that you don't know think about you.
Steve, you got one last quick question, both of you guys. Next 2026, as we sit here at the end of 25, describe it: tumultuous, stabilizing, for regular people.
Destabilized. And inflation is I'm pivoting into my the one thing that keeps me, actually nothing really keeps me up at night, but to use that metaphor, that inflation will turn out to be a bigger problem, and affordability will remain a big front burner issue. due to the money illusion, I don't think Trump's going to put this genie back in the bottle. He's not going to be able to explain to somebody, no, you don't look at nominal prices. You adjust them for inflation and get a real value.
I know.
This is something, this is something for the university classroom, but it's not for politics.
No.
Dave?
It's not going to happen. Trump is a genius at communication. There's no question about it. I mean, he just hogs the airwaves, shall we say, takes up all the space. But this one, he's not going to be able to explain his way out of.
Dave?
Well, I in 2015, I made what was, I think, an overwhelming case that we had yet again cornered ourselves and we're looking into the abyss. And I made it with stats and graphs and everything, but I also cited, and I've reiterated these citations, 25 legends who shared this view, who could not believe what a mess they'd recreated in 2015. Yet here we are. Now, does that mean they were wrong? I don't think so. At some point, the great equilibration will take place, and what could have been a total mess could turn out much worse. I have a fourth turning section this year in which I look at a dozen institutions that could disappear over the next 10 years. At some point, I don't know, but they include all sorts of interesting things like academia as we know it, a number of sovereign states, a number of democracies without losing borders, but the democracies, the markets, of course. I think PE and the real estate market's an unbelievable mess in the making. So I think destabilizing is a good guess. I think that's the sweet spot of an error bar. It's right in the center of the error bar of a guess. So I agree with that.
So we've got the continued chaos going. The question is, do you think we'll really have a Willie E. Coyote moment? That means I mean in New York. I mean in the market.
Yeah, I do, because I think we've just got too much accrued unburnt, tinder in the system now. I wanted to ask you about shadow banking, and they act like it's not a risk to the banking system. I go, what are they using, the blockchain?
Yeah.
Of course it is, right? And I think my sources have convinced me that it could be much uglier than 08.
So I think our basic conclusion is stay on guard. A defensive crouch is probably the way to be.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, where can people find you?
On X at Steve_Hanke, and I'm proud to say I've got 816,100 followers as we speak today. That's in the realm of economists. That's number 3. Number 1 is Paul Krugman.
So that's the problem, because that means there's an inverse correlation here. So you've just hammered yourself.
No, let me come back on that, and that is to say, since Paul left the New York Times, where he was, shall we say,
daily idiocy,
way out on the end of the distribution, and he started writing Substacks. I read the Substack pieces that Paul's putting out on a regular basis, and there's a lot of it I agree with.
So I one day years ago.
Let me put it this way: in the New York Times, he was focused really on politics, on partisan politics. There's still quite a bit of that, but there's much more focus on economics, and so it's worth a read.
Not writing about Kung Pao chicken now, I'm told. I one time tried to give Krugman a little slack to you in an email, and you uncorked. You
Yeah,
you were not ready for Slack.
well,
I guess you're ready now.
well, maybe with age one mellows out a little bit. Remember the Indonesian affair when I was Suharto's chief economic advisor. Krugman came off with a huge ad hominem attack on me, and actually in Fortune magazine. He referred, the title of the article was "The Rupiah Rasputin." That happened to be yours truly.
Well, I've been attacked by the Zionists this year, and what I have discovered is that I'm not a big fan of being in the big league shooting ground. I'm not. I do not like it. I do not enjoy it, which very much has influenced my thinking.
Yeah, so I don't enjoy it either, but I did after that Fortune magazine came out, article came out by Krugman, the Rupiah Rasputin. I called Milton Friedman and I said, Jesus, what the hell should I do with this? I said most of it is false. It's just a bunch of crap, but it stings. And Milton started laughing and he said, well, let me read it, send it to me. So I sent it to him, and he called me back and he said, Steve, he says, don't do anything. He says, you won. He said, that was the ad hominem.
I know.
He said, when they have to stoop to ad hominem, you've won.
But the people you don't know and therefore get into your diseased mind still somehow make it sting. I have to disagree with Milton on a point. He says everything, inflation's always about money. I actually think a better way to phrase it is inflation's about government spending, which then influences the money.
Yeah, well, it is on the condition that the deficits are monetized and turned into money. If the deficits aren't monetized, you have no problem because they're selling the treasuries to the non-bank public and actually decreasing the money supply.
Right. But that's not what we do.
No, that's not what we do because the Fed is independent.
Yeah, exactly. Very independent, just like my kids.
Okay.
Dave, where can people find you real quick?
I'm at Twitter at David B. Collum. If you search my name on YouTube, you'll hear all sorts of rants. And I've got tons of Substack followers, never having written a single blog. And so I don't know why. And I have 145,000 followers, which is big for a chemist. I don't know how'd you get your ranking? I don't know how you do that. But I was happier when I had 350. My Twitter feed was much more meaningful with 350 than 145,000.
Thank you guys both for doing this. For people that are watching, listening, I put all my conversations up on Substack early for paid subscribers and Patreon as well. So if you like what I'm doing, please, and have the financial means, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. And then for those watching on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple, if you like it, share it, comment it. I read all the comments, and I thank you both. And Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we got to do this again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. So, thanks for having us and hosting us, and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to both of you. And Dave, in January we'll get you on with Madam Hanke.
Okay, or otherwise known as your boss.
The boss, you got
the
it.
boss. Who must be obeyed.
That shows you how much tacit knowledge I picked up when I was in.
Exactly.
Thanks, guys. Mic drop.